During a recent interview on the Fox Propaganda Network, Donald Trump was called out to his face for one of his greatest failures by an unlikely critic. Intrigued? Then click that like, subscribe, and the alert bell, and maybe check out my Patreon link, and enjoy the video. There's no secret here at Pondering Politics, we like to pick on Donald Trump and the Fox Propaganda Network because they both suck for various reasons, too many reasons to name in such a short amount of time. But occasionally, they find themselves on opposite sides of an issue. And in that case, it's almost like the 2014 Godzilla film where Godzilla's, storming into the bay near San Francisco, and he's going to fight the other kaiju, and one of the other characters just says, "Let them fight." It's kind of a situation like that. And so not too long after his disastrous interview with Bret Baier on the Fox Propaganda Network, in which Trump was regularly humiliated, he decided to go back for round two with a different host, to be sure, and we'll get into that. But for whatever reason, even though he was smack-talking Fox News to Bret Baier's face during this interview months ago, he just decided to go back, either because beggars can't be choosers or because his humiliation kink manifested and he just felt the need to scratch that itch. But the bottom line is he allowed himself to be interviewed by the Fox Propaganda Network again. Now, this time, I guess Trump thought he was being clever by avoiding Bret Baier, who, again, is maybe outside of Neil Cavuto and Howard Kurtz, probably the closest thing to, like an actual credible journalist. So Trump wanted to avoid a credible journalist, but instead of going with Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity, he picks Maria Bartiromo, who we also pick on in this channel because, again, she's kind of crazy and deserves it. But Maria Bartiromo surprises us in this clip because she calls Trump out to his face for one of his greatest failures. And I want to play the clip, and we'll unpack it.
Thing that you could look back on in 16 that you think maybe you want to do differently this time around?
Well, the mistakes would be that a lot of people, for instance, say you should have been softer. But I was under siege by people that were very dishonest. If I was soft, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. Believe me, I wouldn't have been able to finish out one of the most successful terms as president.
I don't know what successful term of presidency he's talking about, because the one that he was in, his presidency, it was not a successful term by any stretch of the imagination. He tanked the economy under his disastrous leadership. There were nearly 500,000 casualties of COVID. According to one of his own medical advisors, as a matter of fact, Dr. Deborah Birx, she believes that hundreds of thousands of those fatalities were avoidable had Trump just listened to the silence and depoliticized the medical advice. Whatever. By every stretch of the imagination, the first year of the first term of the Trump administration, which will hopefully be the only term of the Trump administration, was just an absolute disaster. But whatever.
To a point where it was so successful that I'm leading by 50 points right now. That wouldn't have happened. The mistake would be people. I wouldn't have put a guy like Bill Barr in. He was weak and pathetic. I wouldn't have put Jeff Sessions in. There are some people that I wouldn't have put in. Most people were good. But I had some people, we had Esper. I didn't like him. He was incompetent, I thought. We had other people I didn't like.
Why did you put them in the job then?
Because every president, you put somebody in, you think they're good. But one thing that has happened, and I find it very interesting, and this is the way life goes, I put people in. I was there 17 times in Washington, D.C. in my whole life. Okay.
Look at her expression. Like she's not buying it at all. Of course, Donald Trump won't accept responsibility for anything, but he's mentioning, and he didn't go through them all, but Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr were two of his attorneys general. Mark Esper was the acting Secretary of Defense. These are highly prominent cabinet positions. And Donald Trump is saying that they suck. Now, if you don't count this interview and count things that he said, he's insulted, he's bashed most of his chiefs of staff, secretaries of state, White House press secretaries. You name it. If it was a high-profile cabinet or near-cabinet level, senior advisor position in the White House, odds are Donald Trump has talked smack about them. So he didn't even get the chance to go through all the names of the people he thinks sucks. You would think that that's a reflection of his judgment as a hiring manager. But, of course, he's just desperate to deflect from the criticism here. And, again, Maria Bartiromo, she's obviously either – I don't know if she's genuinely a cultist or if she just is performatively, but you can see that from that smile. She's like, okay, sure, whatever you say, Mr. President. Let's continue.
Okay, I never stayed overnight. The press actually reported 17. I don't know if it's right, but it's probably pretty right. I never stayed overnight, ever. And then all of
I never stayed overnight. It's like he's so, like he is wandering down any sentence fragment possible to avoid answering the question because he knows there's no coherent way to do it without making himself look bad. And he's definitely not the type of person to take personal responsibility for a series of poor decisions. Now, I would argue that, I mean, he's making the case that those people were unqualified and they were terrible. That's his opinion. But if that's the case, he's the one who hired them, so it's his fault. But he will never accept that.
all of a sudden, I'm the president of the United States, and it's like a different society. I was New York, and it was a different thing. So I didn't know people. I became president. I'm riding down Pennsylvania Avenue with our first lady. I had 250 motorcycles. I had armies. I had everything. I said, "Do you believe it? We're president. Take a look. This is wild, right?" But I never was involved in that. And
So you didn't.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like he's just so desperate. He's hoping that he can filibust and she'll just ask a different question. But note what happens.
Didn't know what to expect.
No,
is
no,
what you're saying.
well, I didn't know the people. I know the people now better than anybody's ever known the people. I know the good ones, the bad ones, the dumb ones, the smart ones.
Well,
I
you
think the
didn't
loyal
drain the
ones-
swamp like you said you would. You didn't drain the swamp.
I did. I fired Comey. I fired a lot of people. A lot of the people I fired. I fired Comey very early. And, there was a question as to whether or not you could. But I fired Comey.
I don't know what he's talking about, the question of whether or not you could. The FBI director serves at the pleasure of the president. He's absolutely like an at-will employee. But the funny thing is, again, so right there, he was like, well, listen, at the time I didn't know the people. But now I know. Now I know them better than anybody. I know the people better than anybody. Believe me, people who professionally know people, they come to me and they say, sir, you know people better than anybody. I mean, it's just a child's cope. I mean, it's just pure copium. Then when she calls him out on that promise, well, you promised to drain the swamp, and you failed. Actually, by his definition, he contributed to the swamp because he empowered Sessions, he empowered Barr, he empowered Esper, Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who Trump now hates, was also hired under Trump. James Mattis, who was one of the secretaries of defense, Trump doesn't like him either. John Kelly, chief of staff. Mark Meadows, chief of staff. Reince Priebus, chief of staff. It's just Mick Mulvaney, chief of staff. It goes on and on and on, all the people that Trump doesn't like. Trump empowered them in the first place. So Trump doesn't get credit for losing those people or ditching those people. Comey was one name. And I don't think that Jim Comey was part of the swamp. I have my issues with James Comey because I think his announcement in the 2016 presidential election, weeks before the ballots were cast, that he was reopening his investigation into Hillary Clinton, helped contribute immensely to Trump's victory. So I have my beef with him there. But you fired Comey, but you then replaced Comey with Christopher Wray, who you now hate too. Christopher Wray being the current serving FBI director, who's appointed by Trump and continues to serve under Biden. So no matter how you try to map this, Donnie, you get no credit here. You added to the swamp. You didn't drain the swamp. And so it's just hilarious to see him cope with that. Now, I want to quickly play one other clip here, just as a reminder, okay, that not only did Trump not drain the swamp, not only did he add to the swamp, he swore repeatedly throughout 2015 and 2016 that he would hire the best people. Let's play the clip.
America great again. We're going to use our best people. We can do it because the people are so amazing. I want the best people. But the cabinet, we're going to have all the best people. We're going to find out who they are.
So we're going to get the best people, but we're going to use our best people.
We need to get the best and the finest.
We're going to deliver. We're going to get the best people in the world.
We're going to have the best people in the world.
You got to pick the best people.
So there you have it. He said repeatedly, they're going to get the best people. He has an eye for the best people. He's got the best people who want to work for them. And then flash forward, 5, 6, 7 years later, all those people suck. That is ultimately an indictment of Donald Trump. And no matter how he tries to spin this, there's no way to do it successfully. Where even Maria Bartiromo was like, hey, this doesn't fly. You failed. This is your failure. And so having her point that out to his face is just hilarious. And it makes me wonder if he'll go back for another Fox News interview in a month or 6 weeks and try his hand with another host. I tried Brett Baer, didn't work. Maria kind of sandbagged me there. That didn't work either. So I guess I'm going to have to try Laura. Laura Ingraham, where are you, Laura? So we'll see what happens in about 6 weeks.